Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of There's a Thing on the Green Screen right there. Well, anyway, I meant to say hardware news, PC news, whatever. The point is, I reported on, and there's been a lot of articles about, you've probably seen the AMD 7800 X3D chips and some other 3D chips reportedly burning out motherboards. And the chips themselves, they're dead. What's going on? There's been a lot of speculation. We now have an article with an official statement from AMD. We also have a statement from ASUS, but I'm not sure I would go as far as saying that this issue is completely resolved at this point. It looks like that thing's back on my green screen. Here, let's just move the camera down a little bit. There we go. I think that works. All right, so here's the official statement from AMD. We are aware of a limited number of reports online claiming that excess voltage while overclocking may have damaged the motherboard socket and pin pads. We are actively investigating the situation and are working with our ODM partners to ensure voltages applied to Ryzen 7000 X3D CPUs via motherboard BIOS settings are within product specifications. Anyone whose CPU may have been impacted by this issue should contact AMD customer support. Okay, so basically AMD is officially aware of and investigating the issue and are saying to reach out to their customer support if you have been impacted by this. They're looking at BIOS settings and all of that. Now, one thing I'll mention here is that there's a lot of speculation and educated guesses going on at what's happening here. A lot of YouTube channels, articles, things on the topic. One of the big theories is it could be Expo memory profiles, which is technically overclocking and does technically void warranties, could be related to the issue. Now, I've got to say that I'm glad AMD is saying to reach out to their customer support. If this was caused by Expo memory issues, which again, can actually void your warranty, I really hope that AMD chooses to honor this anyway under any kind of warranty service. They really should, because they have used Expo memory settings in their own advertisements for the performance of their CPUs. And when they shipped out review samples to reviewers, they gave them Expo memory kits and wanted them to use them. So given that all of the performance numbers and all of that have been based on Expo memory, if that does end up being part of what caused the issue here, not only do I hope that they solve the issue without impacting the performance of the CPUs, but like I said, I hope they honor warranty claims even if it's technically did void warranty, given how these are advertised. Now, ASUS, before we got the official statement from AMD, Der Bauer did a video on the topic, and since ASUS motherboards were some of the first ones reported to have this issue, he did get a statement from ASUS. They said the EFI updates posted on Friday contain some dedicated thermal monitoring mechanisms we've implemented to help protect the boards and CPUs. We removed older BIOSes for that reason, because a lot of people, myself included, had noticed that they had removed the old BIOSes from their website. That seemed to indicate that they were aware something was wrong and were trying to get rid of ones that weren't working properly. And also because manual vCore control was available on previous builds. So they're wanting to get rid of the manual vCore control. We're also working with AMD on defining new rules for AMD Expo and SoC voltage. We'll issue new updates for that ASAP. Please bear with us. So this statement does seem to indicate it seems like motherboard manufacturers as well as AMD are suspecting the issue is AMD Expo and SoC voltage related. Like I said, I hope that they still honor any sort of warranty claims. When this first came out on Reddit, Gamers Nexus had immediately reached out saying that they would buy the board and chip from the Reddit user who originally reported this. And they get a statement 2 days ago saying that it will arrive to them shortly. It'll take them a few days to do their initial research. Anyway, so the point is that Gamers Nexus should get some good follow-up coverage on this. probably with their own research, and I'm sure they're reaching out for statements from the companies and all of that. So hoping we get a little more final answer on all of this. Before we move on to other news topics, I'm going to give my thoughts on this because I'm actually possibly going to switch out to my upgrade my benchmark system to my 7800 X3D today even. My thought is if you're scared of this burning out, I would say that maybe just disable Expo profiles for now. Like I would update to the latest BIOS, and maybe until we get an official resolution to all of this, it sounds like the most likely culprit right now is related to anything beyond stock settings. So if you wanted to at least temporarily disable Expo and any sort of, even PBO, curve optimizer, any kind of overclocking that you have done, just get everything down to stock settings on the latest BIOS if you want to be extra careful with your hardware until we get updated stuff. The other thing I will mention, though, is that Der Bauer saw a similar looking spot of damage on a 7900X not 3D CPU, which could indicate that the problem might not just be impacting X3D chips, but maybe others as well, and perhaps it's just the X3D chips were maybe more sensitive to it for the full burnout, and that's why that was noticed. Anyway, so I would say that I don't think we're fully resolved here yet, and it wouldn't be unreasonable to reduce everything down to stock settings for the near future. Let's move on to some other topics. How about when are we getting new AMD GPUs? Well, it's looking like AMD board partners are expected to showcase Radeon RX 7600 desktop GPUs at Computex. I'm seeing this reported by videocards.com. All of my links will be to my sources will be in the video description. This is coming from Igor's, Igor, isn't it? Igor's lab. So he has, contacts within the board partners and all of that. So he's not giving, this is nothing official. This is just saying things that he has heard from his contacts with the board partners. Here's the direct quote from Igor. He says, "What I can confirm, however, is that individual AMD board partners will show a Radeon RX 7600 as a finished product at Computex, while other partners who use both AMD and Nvidia chips are first exercising wait-and-see restraint. To paraphrase politely, the statement that you don't want to produce anything just to satisfy production, and where you don't see any chances of profits, then hurts a bit. There is no price basis for a Radeon RX 7700 XT at the moment, because you could even slip into the loss zone because the target group shifts and the price shouldn't fit anymore." So what does this mean? It means that Computex, which kicks off on May 30th, is probably when we will see a RX 7600 GPU from AMD. This kind of chunk of this sounds to me like the some board partners only make AMD GPUs, and they'll be the ones showing these off, and it's looking like the ones who make both AMD and Nvidia GPUs might wait and see if these are actually selling, because sales on GPUs right now are not amazing. It also seems like we're skipping straight down to the 7600. Where's our 7800 XT? Where's our 7700 XT? Well, it sounds like there's concerns about the pricing of those right now, whether it makes sense to even produce them at all. More on that topic here in a second. So I did see if I could get any info on this. There's an article a couple of days ago from WCCF Tech, who is apparently getting some info from ASCII.jp. Theorizing a little bit about the 7800 XT, because there is a Radeon Pro W7800. Now, the Pro Series GPUs with similar naming schemes often end up using very similar hardware to the gaming GPUs with that similar naming, right? So this is basically saying that we could get a good idea of what a 7800 XT would be from AMD if you look to the Pro W7800, which would indicate that it could end up faster or as fast as a 4070 Ti, probably with 16 gigabytes of VRAM and 70 compute units, although there could be a cut down 7800 non-XT that would have fewer compute units. So that's kind of what we're getting out of this, but would we actually see one? because this leak or speculation or whatever it is, hard to tell these days with all of this, is thinking about, okay, what about like a $649 price point for a 7800 XT and a $450 price point for the 7700 XT? Well, let's talk about why we got some problems. So, for example, a couple of days ago, well, actually not a couple of days ago, 18 hours ago, as of the time of filming, I posted that the 7900 XT from AMD has dropped to $762 on Amazon. This is its lowest price in history so far. It comes with a game bundle, so if you're interested in The Last of Us, it increases the value. But the thing is it still a good value? The problem right now, in addition to this just having launched at a ridiculous price of $900, but this is getting closer to what sounds reasonable. The problem, though, is that you can buy a 6950 XT brand new for $600 right now, okay? Now, that means that even at its new lowest price ever, the 7900 XT, if you divide 762 by 600, it's 1.27 times the price, or in other words, 27% more money than the 6950 XT. Whereas if we just pull up a random, like the Tech PowerUp GPU database, this thing isn't perfect, but we're seeing the 7900 XT as about 14% more performance than the 6950 XT. So what we're seeing here is basically that even at significantly reduced pricing, the 7900 XT is actually still offering worse price to performance than AMD's 6000 series. And since the 7000 series doesn't really offer any new features, it's a little bit more energy efficient, but not even that much more energy efficient. Is there really room for a 7800 XT? That's the question. What would it cost? How would it perform? Because if it's performing similarly to a 4070 Ti, the problem is really that the 6950 XT already performs similarly to a 4070 Ti and already only costs $600. So what do you do with your 7800 XT in the current market pricing? I mean, eventually, I'd imagine we sell out of 6950 XTs, but then you launch a product that is less exciting than a GPU that you could already buy new before it sold out. Do you see what I'm saying here? I think AMD's in an awkward place, and I think they did that to themselves by calling this GPU a 7900 XT. The 7900 XT should have been the 7800 XT and should have come in priced closer to $700 initially. Then it would have been a much more exciting product. I think that they got caught off guard because Nvidia's 4070 Ti was originally going to be launched at $900 and called a 4080 12GB. And that's why this exists and was supposed to compete with that. But then when Nvidia switched their strategy, dropping the price by $100 and renaming it a 4070 Ti, I think AMD suddenly got caught off guard with really nothing to do in this price segment and class. Like, anyway, I think that's what happened. So it's looking like, according to these leaks, AMD might just kind of skip that whole segment, at least for now, and just jump in with the 7600, which honestly, I think most people are looking for a cheaper new GPU. But my question then is, how will this compete with AMD's current offerings like a 6700 XT or something like that? Because you can get a 6700 for $300 and a 6700 XT for $340. And so with pricing like that, where does the 7600 come in? And how does this perform relatively? In other words, are they going to have the same issue that that I think they're having with that? So it's basically that their own previous generation is offering such good price to performance right now, and the new generation doesn't really offer much in the way of new features or anything like that. At least Nvidia, I mean, this might not be a good thing for consumers, but at least for Nvidia trying to argue their new generation, they did get a massive step up in energy efficiency and offer frame generation as you know, incentives to go with the new version. AMD at least does have AV1 encoding on their new chips, so there is that, but not everybody cares about streaming or recording gameplay. I'm really curious what happens with this, But anyway, AMD has announced in the CPU and, well, integrated GPU side of things, the Ryzen Z1 and Z1 Extreme chips for handheld gaming PCs. Now, they have a press release, but I actually really like this article from The Verge because they have a few quotes from AMD that I think are very interesting on this topic. So, first of all, what I think is really interesting is that these are not just the same thing as the laptop, like 70, the whatever the Phoenix, the Phoenix, whatchamacallums. Where is the quote from the guy? There's a quote from the guy. There's a quote where he talks about that these are customized specifically for handheld gaming systems, which I think is very interesting. Anyway, the quote's in here, I promise, but overall, like power-wise, gaming performance-wise, these look extremely interesting. Of course, they're much more powerful than a Nintendo Switch. It looks like there are two versions of this. There's an 8-core, 16-thread CPU being paired with 12 RDNA 3 compute units for the graphics core with 24 megabytes of cache, offering up to 8.6 teraflops of graphics performance. And they also have a cut-down version, that's the not extreme version, which does look pretty significantly cut down, especially on the graphics, with 6 cores, 12 threads, and 4 RDNA 3 compute units, 22 megabytes of cache, 2.8 teraflops of graphics performance. Now, obviously these are much more powerful than a Nintendo Switch. One thing that is interesting in this article is comparing it, well, what about things like the Steam Deck or the PS5? Well, the PS5 is 10.28 teraflops, and the Steam Deck is 1.6 teraflops. So you can see that, well, this isn't as powerful as a PS5. I mean, that's getting a lot closer than something like a Steam Deck does, which is only at 1.6, which is then weaker than even the extremely cut down non-extreme version of this. Now, one thing to mention with all of this, though, is that they're showing all of these, and especially these performance numbers that we see here, they're showing this at the 30-watt energy consumption mode, where something like the Steam Deck runs at 15 watts. Now, this is also being tested on like some kind of test build of the new ROG Ally, although these will be temporarily exclusive to the ROG Ally Steam Deck competitor handheld. That's not going to be permanent. It's going to be temporary. So this will go into other handhelds, but like I said, it's running in a 30-watt mode, which might be more useful in a docked mode than in a handheld mode if you want any kind of decent battery life. So that being said, they're showing off here games played at 1080p, but actually upscaled to 1080p from 720p using RSR at the low settings. Now that might not sound super exciting, but these are targeted at handheld devices, so 720p upscaled with RSR to 1080p on a small screen actually looks pretty good. And these are not lightweight games, at least not all of them. You're seeing things like Red Dead Redemption 2 averaging over 60 FPS at these settings, Borderlands 3 over 60 FPS, CSGO up here, 200 FPS, Grand Theft Auto 5 over 100 FPS, Company of Heroes 3 at 60, Forza Horizon 4 over 140. There's good stuff here. Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 98. Far Cry 6 at 59, Dota 2 at 104. There's some very interesting performance numbers there. Now, here we're seeing, where is it? That's the Z1 Extreme. Here's the Z1 Non-Extreme. So at the Non-Extreme, we're seeing, again, significantly reduced performance, but still extremely playable. You're not getting 60 FPS in Red Dead Redemption 2 anymore. You're more at like 40. But these are very interesting results. Now, here you can see the Z1 versus the Z1 Extreme if you want to see them side by side and at 1080p native resolution. So this is still low settings. We're not using RSR anymore. 1080p native performance. Very interesting here. You can see where they're performing similarly. I would imagine this is a CPU limitation in something like Dota 2. Where it doesn't need more than 6 threads and it's not the GPU is the limiting factor. That's where I think they're performing more similarly. where they're performing with a wider variance, I would imagine that's where you're more bound by the GPU, and the 12 compute units versus the 4 compute units is causing a wider difference. Although, in a quote from AMD here, the AMD Senior Technical Marketing Manager, Don Woligroski, I probably mispronounced it, says that fast memory is, in a lot of these cases, what games are really hungering for. So they actually find that it's probably the fact that these are using the LPDDR5 memory, since you're on an integrated chip, that's actually holding back performance in a lot of games. So a lot of games would be hungry for that. Anyway, this is very interesting stuff. But here's the quote I was actually looking for originally. He wants you to know that the Z1 isn't simply a matter of rebranding future laptop parts, though, adding that it uses customized power and voltage curves, among other differences. And this author at The Verge has asked for a larger list of changes. But this is extremely interesting to me, because what this means is a lot of times these handheld gaming PCs were just using laptop chips from AMD. At extremely low power settings, whereas the Steam Deck had actual custom silicon that was more targeted specifically for the handheld device. This looks like AMD is now taking this whole handheld Steam Deck style device more seriously as its own product class and offering hardware that is tuned specifically for this use case, which I think is fantastic. Now, speaking of the ROG Ally specifically, it's looking like we'll hear more about its pricing on May 11th, because that's going to be one of the big deals, and that's one of the places where, despite the Steam Deck now getting probably outperformed from a hardware standpoint by these more up-to-date systems, that doesn't mean they still can't compete in pricing, since they have the lesser hardware, as well as they can, Valve can make money off their store, so they don't need to make as much money off the hardware itself. But it's looking like May 11th is when we'll hear more about this ROG Ally pricing. And here's again, videocards.com giving you some idea of the specs difference between this and the Steam Deck. Now, this has been really interesting. So there's been a lot of talk about VRAM lately, and especially 8 gigabyte cards like the 3070 and 3070 Ti being held back by their 8 gigabytes. So there was, this is at videocards.com, but they're reporting on Paulo Gomez and his friend basically taking a 3070 with 8 gigabytes and just modding 16 gigabytes onto it. So apparently, by replacing the memory and grounding some resistors on the PCB, it is possible to trick the card into supporting a different memory altogether, in this case with twice the capacity. Apparently, this did cause flickering or black screens until they set the GPU to high-performance 3D mode. And once this is done and the graphics card can support this type of memory, there shouldn't be any drawbacks. Although I'm not sure this was really tested thoroughly enough to be sure that there would really be no drawbacks to this situation. They did test it in Resident Evil 4. And did notice a massive improvement to the 1% lows, going from 7 FPS to 69 nice FPS. And Resident Evil 4 is one of the games where 8 gigabytes of VRAM has been a significant problem, because that game is very VRAM hungry, like like several other recent titles. Now, there's a whole YouTube video on this from Paulo Gomez that you could take a look at. Now, in a different way, Hardware Unboxed has also been looking at what if the 3070 had 16 gigabytes, but rather than actually modding a 3070 to have 16 gigabytes, they looked at the professional series of GPUs from Nvidia that uses basically the same GPU as a 3070, clocked a lot lower though, but with 16 gigabytes of VRAM. This is the A4000, and tested it out, again noticing massive improvements to frame time graphs in games that are VRAM limited, in this case like The Last of Us. They tested a lot of other ones. So this is an interesting look at it as well. Now in this video, Steve at Hardware Unboxed gave some really good information on why is Nvidia being so stingy with the VRAM. Now there's probably a lot of reasons for this. There is the whole planned obsolescence argument that I see in a lot of YouTube comments, but what you don't see a lot of in the YouTube comments, what I think is a very good point in this video, is it's to segment the market between professional GPUs and gaming GPUs. Now, to be fair, there are other things that separate those GPUs, but a big one is a lot of professional applications do need more VRAM, and the professional series of GPUs costs a lot more money. So Nvidia can make more money on that if they give it more VRAM, and people are less likely to just go with the gaming card because of that VRAM limitation. That's another one of the reasons why Nvidia would segment, would put such low VRAM capacities on their gaming GPUs. Anyway, speaking of other GPUs, how about Nvidia forcing MSI to unlaunch their RTX 3060 Ti Super 3X? Because that Super 3X was the name of the cooler, but Nvidia is known for super branding actually being a distinct type of GPU that's actually different than the non-super version. So because the Super 3X sounds a lot like this would be a 3060 Ti Super, but it's not, because there isn't a 3060 Ti Super, it looks like Nvidia has forced MSI to change the naming on that GPU. So that's kind of interesting. In other GPU cooler news, it looks like the company Sparkle, which had in the past produced GPU coolers but hadn't for a long time, has joined Team Blue and is producing an A750 Titan, Orc, and an A380 ELF graphics card announced. It looks like they have embraced the we got Intel with their Arc Alchemist, and then we got Battle Mage and Celestial coming out. Very D&D sounding, fantasy naming schemes. Looks like Sparkle has embraced that kind of naming scheme. But when you actually look at the designs of the GPUs, one thing I like that they're offering here, and honestly, this seems to be the case with Intel's own designs and some of their other board partners, is these don't look super gamery. Like, I get it if you want a gamery RGB graphics card and all that, but some people might want something that's a little just more sleek and professional looking for their aesthetic in their case. And I actually really like that we're seeing that option here from Sparkle, although it does say Sparkle on the back, so you got that. Anyway, so if you're interested in that type of design, we got Sparkle entering that market. Now, I should report on this. Microsoft has been trying to buy Activision for quite a while now here. Well, it looks like UK regulators have shot the deal down. The CMA has prevented Microsoft's proposed purchase of Activision over concerns the deal would alter the future of the fast-growing cloud gaming market, leading to reduced innovation and less choice for UK gamers over the years to come. Now, if you're hoping that this is finally done and out of the headlines, I would definitely expect Microsoft to appeal this decision, which will drag this whole process on. And so I don't think it's quite dead yet, but there's that. Don't know why I threw that in at this point in the video, kind of meant to keep talking about Intel. So let's keep talking about Intel. Anyway, Intel does have a new driver out. Doesn't look like there's any massive changes here. The big highlights are Vulkan video extension support for H.264, AVC, and H.265 HEVC decode, and a fixed issue involving some USB audio devices. Still a lot of known issues, but in general, I'm just happy to see Intel continuing to pump out the graphics drivers, continuing to fix issues, because that's the biggest thing, is Intel just needs to continue to iterate on their software and get it up to speed. Also, get their Intel XeSS into more games, which we're seeing here with Forza Horizon 5 high-performance update adding Intel XeSS support, as well as new content and other PC performance improvements, but I think that's a big highlight there. Now, in DLSS 3 news, we do have DLSS 3 added to Returnal. It already had DLSS support, but now it has DLSS 3 frame generation support, and it's also confirmed for the Lord of the Rings Gollum. So that's incoming. Nvidia has provided some performance numbers for Returnal using DLSS 3 versus DLSS 3 off in gray, and you can see it for their whole 4000 series lineup. And basically, my standpoint on frame generation is it's pretty good. I like it. It takes advantage of your high refresh rate monitor as long as you get a high enough base frame rate. for the latency not to feel bad and for there not to be a lot of difference between frames. Because the wider difference there is between your 2 frames, the harder it is for the algorithm to get a good frame in between without artifacts, right? So if you're already getting, 84 FPS and then you enable this on your 4090, you were already doing well, and now you're doing even better. And taking advantage of your high refresh rate monitor, something like that. Pretty cool stuff. I'm just glad to see it in more games, regardless of whether everybody is going to use it. That's only a good thing. Now, speaking of getting it into more games, how about modders adding it to games? DLSS 3 mod for the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim is out now in an alpha build. This is from modder Pure Dark, who has been working on implementing DLSS, as well as DLSS frame generation into games. It's pretty cool that this is able to be modded into games now. The main downside in the Elder Scrolls implementation is at this point in time, it's not supporting reflex. There's something going wrong with the DX11 pipeline with reflex in this mod. And that's a bit of a problem because without reflex, the input latency becomes more of an issue when using it. Although I imagine if you're at a high enough base frame rate, it might still be okay. Something you might want to play around with. Speaking of other mods, RTX Remix makes Torchlight, Mountain Blade, and other classic PC games look lovely. So, modders had already been using RTX Remix files from the Portal RTX to mod older games. But recently, Nvidia did release RTX Remix Runtime as an open source project that you can now work on older games. That makes support a lot easier. Now, to be clear, we still do not have the creator kit, although early access for that has been announced as coming soon. So these kinds of mods should get even more impressive soon. But we are getting more and more games and better implementations in games with issues being fixed now that there actually is an official runtime release open source for people to play around with. So that's pretty cool. And last thing I'll mention is that there had been rumors of an L4 cache on Meteor Lake chips from Intel, codenamed Adamantine? I don't know. But L4 cache for Meteor Lake does look to be confirmed in a patent listing. Now, we'll have to see what that does and how much it helps in various stages, what that helps with versus something like an L3 cache, because the further the cache gets out, the less, performance improvement, I guess, you get from having it. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. But I've got to get on with life. I hope you guys avoid the video. Geez, did I just say I hope you guys avoid the video? Well, that's just going to curse this in the YouTube algorithm now. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you have an excellent day.